कथामृतम् तप्तजीवनम् कविभिरीडितम् कल्मषापहम् श्रवणमङ्गलम् श्रीमदाततम् भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जना. The Master and Vijay Goswami. That's a chapter which we are studying now. We will continue from the portion which we have concluded in the last class, that we found that Sri Ramakrishna is speaking that is the ego which is the cause of our ignorance, that by getting rid of ego, one attains that knowledge. So, in the words of Ramakrishna, when shall I be free? When I cease to be. So, in his words, one can get rid of the ego after the attainment of knowledge. On attaining knowledge, one goes into samadhi and the ego disappears. But it is very difficult to obtain such knowledge. So, as in the last class we were indicating, that it is the ego which is the cause of our bondage. And from where the ego arises? From ignorance. As in the Yoga Sutra, if you study the Yoga Sutra, they speak of Pancha Klesha, 5 afflictions. What are the 5 afflictions by which each and every individual is afflicted? The 5 afflictions are avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. Avidya speaks of the ignorance. From ignorance arises asmita. That's the terminology for ego. Ahankara in Vedanta, in yoga it is asmita. From ajnana comes asmita, the sense of my identity with the body-mind complex. And from that follows the next 3, the raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. What are they? Raga speaks of attachment, dvesha speaks of hatred, and abhinivesha speaks of clinging to life, which entails actually in the fear of death. There is not a single creature who is not afraid of death. From a single cellular organism to the human being, there is not a single creature who is not afraid of death. So what it speaks of, that when that conscious principle somehow identifies itself with the body-mind complex, from that arises the ego. Because of the ignorance, one identifies himself with the body-mind complex, with the body and with the mind. The consciousness, when it comes in proximity of the body and mind complex, seeing its reflection there, it gets identified with it. As in the scriptures, they give an example that suppose a pure crystal, in the presence of a pure crystal, you place a red flower. Just in its proximity, the red flower has been kept. Immediately the crystal appears to be red. It has not become red. Just by being in the proximity of the red flower, the crystal appears to be red. So similarly, when the self is in proximity of the body-mind complex, in no way the self is getting associated with the body-mind complex, but it appears just the way that the crystal appears to be red. Similarly, the body-mind complex in association with the consciousness appears to be conscious, and the moment it appears to be conscious, what happens? The sense of ego develops, that I am this body-mind complex. And from that, the 3 other afflictions come into existence. Attachment, that whatever now is favorable for my body-mind complex, I get drawn towards it, I get attached towards it. Whatever is not favorable for its existence, whatever is not pleasurable for its existence, I get detached from it. And if anything is there which entails in the disintegration of the body-mind complex, is going to destroy it, I will be running away from it. I will be scared about it. And that speaks of the abhinivesha. So all these afflictions, from where it comes? From that asmita. The moment the consciousness gets associated with the body-mind complex, this all the other things, the obsession, the fight and flight response, they come into existence. The moment I realize that I am not this body-mind complex, I am the eternal self beyond this, then naturally all other afflictions, they just fall off. So the dissolution of the ego alone speaks of liberation. That's why Sri Ramakrishna, in some other context, we find when someone asks him, "Sir, when shall I be free?" His very simple answer, "When I," that I is with the inverted comma, "when I cease to be." When that I ceases, that automatically leads to that liberation. That I is the cause of bondage. And that happens only in samadhi. How to get rid of the ego? It's only when in the deep meditation. That's in the last class we were indicating, that what I am meditating upon is not important. The primary thing is how intensely I am meditating on it. Whatever the concept of divinity I may have, that's a mere concept. I have to meditate upon it. When my mind becomes extremely focused on it, I will find that everything else starts falling off. In our day-to-day life, we have that experience. When I am getting extremely focused to certain thing, I am intently playing an instrumental music, a musical instrument, of which I have a developed skill. I get so much absorbed in it, I will find that for hours I go on playing. I forget that I am hungry, I am thirsty, I am in need of rest, I have to sleep. I forget. Maybe throughout the night you will find that there are such passionate music lovers throughout the night. They are in deep contemplation with their own music. What has happened? The more the mind gets focused, the other things starts falling off. What to speak of external distraction? Even the bodily feelings, which arises because of the alarm system of this biological alarm system of the body, the hunger, the thirst, these are all the biological alarm. That it is the time for you to take food, it is the time for rest. All those biological alarm system, they are there, which needs a part of my mind. I have to give an attention to that. And that has been taken away by the object of my concentration. So what happens? They all start falling off. And that itself entails in great bliss. What to speak of falling off of the ego? When all the other distractions starts falling off, you start getting rid of all the baggages which you are carrying always. We are always carrying the baggage of our concerns, our desires, our thoughts. All this baggage we are always carrying. So as our mind gets focused, they start falling off. And that ensures a let go. And that itself speaks of ananda. A tremendous bliss ensues from it. And at last, the last thing which is to fall off is the ego. From the very inception of our life, the ego is there always with us. Even a small child who is born, he knows he is this body-mind complex. A part of the mind is always engaged with that feeling that I am this body-mind complex. So that is the hardest thing to fall off. But when in meditation, at last, because of our tremendous love for our object of meditation, it so happens that at last, even the trace of ego to which we are always holding, that also falls off. The mind's focus has become so intense. The object of focus takes over the entire mind. And then the wonderful thing happens. The ego falls off. As we were saying, it can happen with any object of meditation. And the moment it happens, in the scriptures they speak of samadhi. You have entered into samadhi. The moment the ego falls off. What is that? It's called Triputi Bheda. That however focused my mind may be, I always know I am meditating. That I am the meditator. There is an object of meditation, and the meditation is the process which is connecting these two. The moment the ego falls off, the idea that I am meditating is no more there. I become as if one with the object of meditation. That is called the Triputi Bheda. The triad collapses. And that takes you into samadhi. You become one with the object of meditation. And that speaks of falling off of the ego. And that takes you to the realm of that realization, where you find the mind through which the white light was passing to break into the spectrum of 7 colors. That's the example which we give, that the world which we see, the entire phenomenal existence which we are experiencing is because of the mind. Beyond the mind, the conscious principle is there. The conscious principle through the mind is experiencing this world of this name and form. So in samadhi, when the ego falls off, the mind itself has to be connected to the ego to be functional. The moment ego falls off, the mind collapses. And what happens? The spectrum becomes one with the white light. For the first time, you become one with that non-dual consciousness, of which alone is the reality. So you get to go to that realization. And that's the idea of samadhi, which has been spoken of in the scriptures, which happens to any spiritual practitioner who is sincere. That's why we find in all the religions, as in the last class we were indicating, that those who are mystics, those who are not satisfied just with the doctrines and dogmas, those who are not satisfied only with the belief system, they want to go to that realization. The moment they go to that realization, they immediately get identified with that non-dual consciousness. So that's the idea of samadhi. When it has happened, when the I has fallen off. And that's the thing Sri Ramakrishna is indicating, that when one can get rid of the ego, one can get rid of the ego only after the attainment of knowledge. On attaining knowledge, one goes into samadhi and the ego disappears. But it is very difficult to obtain such knowledge. So you can easily understand that how intensely focused our mind should be on the object of meditation, so that all the distractions falls off. It's not an easy thing. It needs a lot of effort, a lot of sincere effort, and that comes only when we are sincere about our practice, and the sincerity comes from the genuine conviction that there is a way out from all the polarities of life which we are experiencing, all the dualities of life which we are experiencing. We can transcend that, and that realization alone can give us that ultimate satisfaction, the purpose of life. So that's the thing which we find in all the religion, that a few do have that type of conviction, and which enables them, which gives them the motivation to go to that deep spiritual concentration, to go to that state which has been called as the samadhi. So after speaking of that, the gradual gradation of the mind through the various phases of spiritual evolution, as has been known as the arousal of the kundalini, the 7 planes of awareness, that has been indicated by Sri Ramakrishna in the next paragraph of his discussion, as his conversation is going on. So now he speaks of the 7 planes of the mind. It is said in the Vedas that a man experiences samadhi when his mind ascends to the 7th plane. The ego can disappear only when one goes into samadhi. Where does the mind of a man ordinarily dwell? In the first 3 planes. These are at the organs of evacuation and generation, and at the navel. Then the mind is immersed only in worldliness, attached to woman and gold. A man sees the light of God when his mind dwells in the plain of the heart. He sees the light and exclaims, "Ah, what is this? What is this?" The next plain is at the throat. When the mind dwells there, he likes to hear and talk only of God. When the mind ascends to the next plane, in the forehead, between the eyebrows, he sees the form of Satchidananda and desires to touch and embrace it, but he is unable to do so. It is like the light in the lantern, which you can see but cannot touch. You feel as if you were touching the light, but in reality you are not. When the mind reaches the seventh plane, then the ego vanishes completely and the man goes into samadhi. So this, from here you will find in very short, Sri Ramakrishna is speaking of the idea of the arousal of the kundalini, the coiled up energy, as if a serpent is lying coiled in the base of the spine, in the very base of the spine, and it has a tremendous power. If we know how to arouse it, it will rouse through the Shushumna, through the central canalus, and it goes, as it rises through the various sacral plexus. You will find in biology they speak of the sacral plexus. That corresponds to the various planes which has been spoken of here, the 7 planes. It passes through them at last to reach the Shushumna, the final, the state where it's on the crown of our head. When it goes there, a man attains the state of that final samadhi, the 7th plane, where the ego vanishes completely. What actually it is, we read of it, it appears to be very mystical, as if the language is still very mystical. But is there any rational way of understanding it? In Raja Yoga, Swami Vivekananda gives a rational understanding of the rising of the Kundalini. So he gives a very nice example. That what he says, that for the passing in Swamiji's time, the electricity was just discovered. So he knew that the electricity, it needs a medium to conduct. For its conduction, it needs a medium. It has to pass through a wire. So Swamiji is saying that our nerves are also like electricity. Now I think that suppose I have to lift a weight, what happens? That will is generated in my brain. From that will is carried in the form of nerve current through the motor nerves to reach my muscles, and then the muscle will contract and enable me to lift the weight. So it is a will which is getting converted into the nervous current, at last enabling the muscles to contract. So it's similar, it's just almost similar to that electric wire. The current is generated, you switch on, the current passes through the wire, and when it reaches any of the electric appliances, either it's a light or fan, it will give the energy, the form of energy which you want, either in the form of light or in the form of motion, in the case of a fan, or in the case of a motor running, in the form of a motion or light, whatever it may be. So it is after all the electricity which is getting converted. So Swamiji is saying that in those days that just has been discovered, that for electricity to traverse, it needs a medium, it needs a wire. Similarly, our will to get converted into action, it needs to pass through that nerve current. But is it always that that medium is necessary? Then Swami Vivekananda gives a second example, that we do need a wire to pass electricity, but in nature we find that when there is a thunderbolt, that from the clouds the electricity is generated and it forms an arc. It comes and touches the ground. Where is the wire? There is no wire. So if the electricity is of tremendous, it has a tremendous voltage, it is a very high voltage, then as such there is no need for the medium. It can pass just through the atmosphere. It doesn't need that a high conductivity medium. It can even pass through the atmosphere and it forms an arc. It comes and touches the earth. Even in Swamiji's days it was not there, but we know that cathode ray tube experiment, well, because with the high voltage, even through that vacuum, we can pass the rays of this cathode rays, the flow of electrons. That's nothing but electricity. So Swamiji is saying the same thing, that when we start meditating, he's saying a wonderful thing, that the spinal cord, they speak of three things: Ira, Pingala, Sushumna. What is this Ira and Pingala? The sensory nerves and the motor nerves. It's just running parallel to the spinal cord. The sensory and the motor nerves are running parallel. So these are the Ira and the Pingala. And what is the Sushumna? Swamiji is saying it is a central canalus. You will find that the spine in the center, each spine, if you just keep one spine, spinal bone over the other, you will find each spine bone is just like the 8 structure. So if you place one above the other, it's so many 8 you have placed. So you get 3 canals, one on the left, one on the right, and where the 8th junction meets, if you just consider a hole there, another canal will be formed there. Another canal will be formed, this third one. So Swamiji is saying that one of them is the Ira, the other is the Pingala, as has been spoken of in our scriptures. The sensory and the motor nerves speaks of the Ira and the Pingala. And what is the Sushumna? The central canalus. It is not, there is no nerve there. The spinal cords use the nutrients to pass through that, but there is no nerve there. There is no current, no nerve current. For nourishing the spinal cord, the nutrients passes through that. In a way, as per the nerve current is concerned, it is hollow, it is vacuum. There is no nerve there. Swamiji is saying just the way the arc is formed between the sky and the ground because of tremendous voltage. Similarly, the one who by concentration have increased the power of his mind by tremendous focus, for him the so-called canal which doesn't carry any nerve, that opens up just like a cathode ray tube. It opens up and the nerve current without the help of any nerve starts moving upwards. And as it starts moving upwards, it will be passing through all these various sacral plexuses, at last to reach the crown of our head, where the spinal cord ends. From the base it has started, and to the end it ends in the crown of the head. So when it ends there, it's when you are reaching the state of that final samadhi where the ego falls off. So as you will find, it's a very interesting thing. So as it is passing, the first 3 that he spoke of, the first 3 planes, speaks of what? It only speaks of all the so-called basal instincts. It speaks of the basal instinct. So when we have evolved, nothing is lost. All the impressions are stored in this first 3 levels of our existence, which speaks of just taking food, procreation, nothing else. So that's the things even Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. Where does the mind of a man ordinarily dwell? In the first 3 planes. These are the organs of evacuation, generation, and the navel. So it's only thinking of having food and procreation, nothing else. So those are the thing which is common for all living creatures. From a bacteria to the human being, no one can stay without taking food. And for propagation of life, they have to procreate. This is the common thing. These, like in an office, you will find that nothing is thrown away. Even the old files which we don't use, they are there in some corner. They're there. that if you need, you can get them. So these all old files, like you can just consider them like old files, they're all stored in the lower 3 plexuses. So when the nerve current is passing through that, even if those who are not a yogi, for them also, that though the nerves are not there, but because of what you say, that our involvement with the life, the nerve current do rise up to certain extent. It can rise only up to that first 3 plexuses, and that speaks of our awareness about this food and procreation. So that's what the level in which we ordinarily stay as a human being, for whom spiritual evolution have not started. But when the spiritual evolution started, now it starts moving still up, and then it reaches the heart center. And Sri Ramakrishna is saying, where he sees the light of God, it speaks of the love which you have developed, the devotion. You will find all the so-called basic needs of life, whether it is food or procreation, they are all necessity. By the necessity, what has happened in the process of evolution, anything out of necessity which you do again and again, that evolves into obsession. It's kind of love. So love is a higher center which develops out of the necessity. The necessity, when repeated, it creates that obsession. So it's a higher center. But when you are directing it to the divine, the same love which goes for the world, now it is channelized for the divine. That helps us to create that tremendous focus. We are not expending our energy and distractions. It is focused for the divine. So it rises up to the heart level to give the first feeling of the devotion. And then it goes to the throat. Then he speaks of God, talks. Even in evolution, you will find that the language comes much later. The emotion even other creatures have. Even you find in other animals, there is a sort of emotion. There is a type of love, but the language, that is still higher. So when the mind rises to the throat level, then that conversation starts, as if you are constantly speaking with the divine. When you still go up higher, it's between the eyebrows. He sees God, as if sees God. What it speaks of? The faculty of visualization. As a human being, you find that the more we are evolved, that we can visualize, we can imagine that I want to build a house. First, I imagine. Everything is actually created twice for a human being. I first create the blueprint and then I go for the creation. So it speaks of evolution, that I can visualize and imagine and give a shape to, as per my imagination. I can build the house as per my imagination, as per the blueprint. I can give a shape to my imagination. That's a human faculty. It's a much evolved faculty. So as you are moving up, you will find all those faculties are opening up for you. First came that love for the divine, then came that love was finding expression through all the hymns, all this conversation is what? You will find in all the religious literature. It is the hymns of the mystics. That's what we all sing. That love finds expression through language, that again finds expression through that visualization. So your mind is evolving at last, as we were speaking of. Then the mind reaches the crown of the head. What has happened? Then the ego factor, with which our limited individuality is kept intact, that also falls off, that merges, taking us to that ultimate realization of samadhi, where the mind falls off for the time being. It falls off. The prism falls off. The spectrum vanishes. Where it vanishes? It merges in the white light. The conscious principle in association with the mind, which is like the prism, breaks up into this world of name and form. The moment this mind falls off, the prism falls off, the spectrum merges with the white light. And then the aspirant realizes that there is only one existence, imperishable existence, which is appearing as many. So that's how he transcends. This transcendence, how it helps? That once you go to that realization, it's not, Sri Ramakrishna will come to the discussion, it is not so easy to kill the ego. Even in our Yoga Sutra, they speak of Savija Nirvikalpa Samadhi. When for the first time you go to that realization, it's not that you stay there. Your subconscious mind is full of ekavritti, that what spiritual practice you have adopted, whether it is taking the name of God or thinking yourself as the Atman, as the consciousness, whatever may be the spiritual practice, that focus has created a single vritti, a single thought which is saturating your mind. Now, the moment you go beyond the mind, you go to that thoughtless belt, thoughtless realm. Now, your subconscious mind is full with that ekavritti. This ekavritti will bring you back from the thoughtlessness to the world of thought. But now it will remain only in this thought level of God consciousness. Because you have already cleansed your mind of distractions with the help of God consciousness. You have already cleansed. So distractions are no more there. So your mind won't go down still below. It will remain in that God consciousness. Now and then going to the state of thoughtlessness, again coming back to the state of God consciousness. So this to and fro will go on till my mind gets saturated with the thoughtlessness. Even this God consciousness, the thought of God, idea of this awareness of the God, that also has been cleansed off. Then ultimately it will go to that Nirvija Nirvikalpa Samadhi. These terms are very important. Savija, that though you are going to the Samadhi, still the seed of that your ego is still there, is saturating your mind. So you will come back, but this will go on as long as you don't cleanse your mind from that ekavritti, the ishtavritti. But it's not the choice of all. There are many aspirants who wants to stay in the world of duality. They don't go to the gross level of so-called the physical interactions as in the sense level. They don't go to that level. But they like to remain in the state of the God consciousness where they relate with the divine through devotion. They don't want to become one with the Absolute. As in the famous words of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that I don't want to become sugar. I want to test the sugar. So that choice comes only when one has reached that state of Samadhi for the first time. So that's the thing. When you go to that, that's when you reach, the Kundalini reaches the 7th plane. Then he has realized the truth. Now whether he wants to remain in the realm of you and me, that God is, I am, that is his choice, or that is the will of the divine. But once he has went there, there is no more ignorance for him. He won't in any way can come down again to the sensate level of existence. So that's the 7th plane where the ego vanishes and the man goes into Samadhi. So in short, this is the journey which has been spoken of, to give a rational understanding of it, that what actually it speaks of. So it speaks of again that tremendous focus. The spiritual journey speaks of going to that ekavritti from sarvarthata, from distraction. The more and more the mind is getting focused, the more and more I am getting spiritual. So this focus is the key for spiritual evolution. Without there cannot be any spiritual progress. The more my mind is focused to the object of my meditation, and the more the distraction falls off, the more I evolve spiritually. That's why Swami Vivekananda used to say that whether you are progressing in spirituality or not, what's the test? What's the subjective test? How can I know that whether I'm progressing in spiritual life or not? He says, how much more time you can spend in that sublime thought level. If you start your spiritual journey, you will find that you sit for meditation in the morning, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. After that, you find your mind is saturated. You cannot continue. You're reading some good books, And after some time you feel you need some distraction. You cannot stay just with that sublime thought. You need some other engagement. And you will find our condition, in the words of Ramakrishna, is like an ordinary housefly. Sometimes it sits in the honey and sometimes it sits in the filth. Sri Ramakrishna is very nicely saying, what spiritual evolution? Spiritual evolution is to become the bee. At present, I am just like a housefly. The housefly has to become like a bee. The bee sits only in the honey. It never sits on filth. So, that's the journey which Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. That gradually, from the sunset level, gradually you go to the level where you live only in the divine plane, not to come back again in the level of sunset existence. So, next, Vijay asks a question. What does a man see when he attains the knowledge of Brahman after reaching the seventh plane? Master, what happens when the mind reaches the seventh plane cannot be described. Once a boat enters the black waters of the ocean, it does not return. Nobody knows what happens to the boat after that. Therefore, the boat cannot give us any information about the ocean. Once a salt doll went to measure the depth of the ocean. No sooner did it enter the water than it melted. Now who could tell how deep the ocean was? That which could have told about its depth had melted. Reaching the seventh plane, the mind is annihilated. Man goes into samadhi. What he feels then cannot be described in words. So that's the example. Nice, two examples. One is saying that the boat goes to the ocean. We know that if an ordinary boat goes to the ocean, it cannot come back because the waves and other things is going to kill him. So there is no return. The idea is there is no return. Again here, the salt doll, the same thing. It merges. The once it touches the ocean, it becomes one with it. So when we hear all those things, sometimes we get scared. We say, what about our individuality? Is it lost? When Swami Vivekananda was delivering lecture in the West and was speaking of this Advaitic realization, where the individuality merges in the absolute, one lady from the audience stood up and she couldn't just resist herself anymore. She shouted out, Swamiji, Swamiji, what happens to our individuality? And Swami Vivekananda's reply was wonderful. He told, Madam, you are not individuals yet. You become individual when you are one with the Absolute. It's very interesting. See, the word individuality means individual. That which is not divisible, that which cannot be divided. In this phenomenal existence, everything has parts. Everything can be divided. Our body is made of innumerable cells. Our mind has innumerable thoughts. Everything is divisible. The absolute non-dual consciousness is something homogeneous, that it cannot be divided. So that speaks of individuality. When Swamiji says you are not individual yet, just see the word itself which we speak of, we don't know the meaning. That which cannot be divided is individual. You become individual only when you merge with the Absolute. And then what Swamiji says is something very interesting. Well, I understand that you are so scared about the idea of merging with the Absolute. And then he told a very interesting thing. You know what it's like? It's just like a small child who is very happy with his toys and his chocolate. He's very happy with this. That is his world. He needs all these toys. If someone comes and says that you have to grow, and the child asks, what will I do by growing? No, you become a scientist. And what? That you will enjoy doing your research in the laboratory as a research scholar. Why just waste your time with this, all toys and all? The child immediately gets scared. Well, how? All the fun of my life is gone. Is there no toys in the laboratory? No. Then I don't want that. This is a life for me. So the child can no way relate to the bliss of a research scholar in the laboratory, of a scientist in the laboratory. He cannot relate that what's the happiness there. Similarly, the happiness of becoming one with the absolute is something which is almost impossible to realize from this sensate level. But as we progress spiritually, we will find that this is something very trivial. The so-called the pleasures of the sensate existence can never satisfy us. It is something which is always, we are, that in the words of Swamiji, ever running, never reaching. We are chasing for it. We never get it. The real happiness, the real satiety is in the absolute, which may be difficult for me to understand with the mind of a spiritual child. As per my spiritual growth is concerned, I am just a child. As Swami Vivekananda used to say, you may look like a very grown-up person, but in spiritual sense, you are all mustached babies. That's the very term he is using, mustached babies. That we have grown physically, we are having mustache, but after all, in spiritual sense, we are babies. We are so much identified with the sensate world that in no way we can relate to the ineffable bliss that can be attained as we evolve spiritually. So that's why he's saying we're all mustache babies. So here Sri Ramakrishna is giving that indication that what happens, that we cannot speak of it. It is something as has been spoken of by William James in his book called The History of World Religion. In that book, he has indicated that if you study all the religions, the mystic aspect of all the religions, you will find a wonderful thing. They all go to some unitary experience. And what's the nature of that unitary experience? 2 words he is using to explain the nature of that unitary experience. He is saying that whatever language they may be using, they all are speaking of something which is noetic. It's no more imagination. For me, God is an imagination. For a person like a mystic who has went to that realization, he is convinced. All his doubts has fallen off because he has seen the truth. So he is convinced about the truth which he is speaking of. No doubt, all the doubts have vanished. As long as I have not seen the ocean, someone can come and create a doubt about the existence of ocean. They may say it's all nonsense. There is nothing called ocean. I may believe him because I am yet to see the ocean. But once I see the ocean, can anyone ever create any doubt in my mind about the existence of the ocean? It's impossible. So Sri Ramakrishna is saying that knowing is believing. So when you have went to that realization, all doubts fall off. You know, you have touched the truth. When Swami Vivekananda in his last days was suffering from innumerable diseases, he knew the death is near. And then he was traveling with his Western disciples. The famous opera singer, the Emma Calvé, was with him. And that nice incident that Swamiji picks up 2 stones in the presence of all these Western devotees and strikes them together. And he has just recovered from a very severe illness. And what he was saying, that whenever death comes near, suddenly I find I am very strong. As strong as this hard rock. By saying that, he just clashes those 2 rocks. Jesus collides those 2 rocks. He says, I am unbreakable like these 2 rocks because I have touched the feet of the divine. So these words, these words sometimes are very mystical. But why it's mystical? Because we cannot relate to it. They have went to that realization. Nothing can affect them. They know that they are something which is one with that absolute, imperishable absolute. So he has gone to that realization. Nothing can annihilate him. So that's the thing that they are speaking of. That they're noetic. They know. But at the same time, what you have realized, if you ask, it is again ineffable. It is almost impossible to describe. That also we can understand why it is impossible to describe. Because the realizations can be communicated if we have same type of realization. I have tasted the mango, you have tasted the mango. When I say it is sweet, it has a nice flavor, you can easily relate to it. But the one who has not tasted it, however I may try, can I ever communicate him the taste of mango? It's impossible. Our communication is something which becomes meaningful only when we have the same fund of experience. If we don't have the same fund of experience, language is of no use. Language is what? That my experience is encoded in the form of language. Who can decode it? The one who has similar type of experience. It is a question of encoding and decoding. Language is something which is we have encoded. Our experience has been encoded in the language. I have encoded my experience in the language, and the one who has same type of experience, only he can decode or she can decode it. If you don't have, how is it possible? So that's why it's almost impossible for a man of realization to relate to the world. Impossible. He can relate to a certain extent. To whom? If there is some another man of realization. Because they have the same fund of experience, same quota of experience. That's why Sri Ramakrishna in some other context is saying very interesting thing. That that's a realized soul. When he meets another realized soul, they are very happy. They will go and embrace each other. It's just like true drug addicts meet each other and they are so elated. They will go and embrace each other because they have the same fund of experience, the true drug addict. They know what's the ecstasy they get from that drug, the high they get from drug. They know. So that's why and when they try to relate to the entire world, they find no one understands them. So he finds another drug addict, he will go run and just go and embrace him because they can relate to the experience. So similarly, Sri Ramakrishna is saying that a realized soul becomes just like a drug addict, gaja khorer shabab. Seeing another realized soul, he will run and embrace him. So he can to a certain extent relate his experience to that person. No one else. They don't have the same fund of experience. So that's the thing Sri Ramakrishna is saying. It is almost impossible to explain once you have got to that domain of experience. You have gone beyond the mind. And language and everything is in the domain of mind. Once you have gone beyond the domain of mind, how can you relate this to your experience, to the world? It's impossible. There are so many other that a girl got married, and after having his first child came back to the village with the child, and all other her friends, they were yet to be married. Some of them got married and not all. Those who were yet to be married, they were still in the village. Now they all came to meet their old friend and asked, what's it to be a mother? What's the happiness to be, how you feel by becoming a mother? And she was just by demeanor showed that she's full of joy. When they asked, she told, I cannot explain. I cannot explain the joy of becoming a mother. I can say only one thing. You have to become a mother. And then you will realize what's the thing I am feeling. So that's the thing. They cannot relate. It's impossible because others don't have the same fund of experience. How will they relate? It's you have to become a mother to understand what's the joy in becoming a mother. So that's the thing which Sri Ramakrishna is saying. That it is almost impossible to relate in words. So the wicked eye, the eye that makes one a worldly person and attaches one to woman and gold is the wicked eye. The intervention of this ego creates the difference between Jiva and Atman. That after speaking of the realization, now he's speaking that as long as the I is there, all the misery, all the mischief is because of that. And that is the wicked eye. And what's the wicked eye? The intervention of this ego creates the difference between the Jiva and the Atman. Water appears to be divided into two parts if one puts a stick across it. But in reality, there is only one water. As we were saying, when you keep a red flower in proximity of the prism or a crystal, the crystal appears to be red, but actually it is not tinged with that color. It just appears. Similarly here, when you put a stick in the water appears to be divided, but actually has the water divided? Nothing. The stick makes us feel that as if there are two parts of water, one on the one side of the stick, one on the other side of the stick. But actually it is the same water. The stick makes just that, gives an appearance that water has been divided into two parts. Similarly, the ego is just like the stick. There's only one non-dual consciousness. Nothing exists apart from that. From ignorance, that ego comes into existence, and that gives us this feeling of you and me. So that's why he's saying that its intervention of the ego creates the difference between the jiva and the atman. Water appears to be divided into two parts if one puts a stick across it, but in reality there is only one water. It appears as two on account of the stick. This I is the stick. Remove the stick and there remains only one water as before. Now, what is this wicked I? It is the ego that says, what? Don't they know me? I have so much money. Who is wealthier than I? If a thief robs such a man of only 10 rupees, first of all, he wrings the money out of the thief, then he gives him a good beating, but the matter doesn't end there. The thief is handed over to the police and is eventually sent to the jail. The wicked I says, what? Doesn't the rogue know whom he has robbed to steal my 10 rupees? How dare he? So Sri Ramakrishna was a very minute observer in Dakshineshwar. That's the incident most probably happened there, that someone have stolen some money from the temple, and he got a good thrashing, and at last he was handed over to the police. And seeing that this tremendous uproar we make out of these incidences, he's just quoting this. And why he's quoting this? Just to say, just see how the I works. That with the egos we have a sense of possession, ahamta and mamata, me and mine. This is me and these are mine. This tremendous, this idea of ahamta and mamata, me and mine, is because of the ego. And once it is created, all the bias comes into existence. That this is me, this is mine, this is not me, this is not mine. All the bias develops. And from the bias you will find that actually, even in the modern psychology they say, that how we become fanatical. They say that whenever we are fanatical, you will find that we are very sincere. What I am saying, I am very sincere. I never feel I am making up my words. But the world feels it. The other feels that what he is saying doesn't make any sense. In the field of politics, you will find sometimes there is some scandal and the government is speaking something as if they are all correct. Nothing has, they have done nothing wrong. That everything, even in sports it happens, everywhere. The two teams are fighting. And you will find both the teams are sincere. They say it is the other who have wronged. Why it happens? In this world you will find it is always the fight of perspectives, never of good and bad. No one feels. Even if you take an interview of a very hardcore criminal in the jail, he will go on blaming the entire world. He will never take the responsibility of himself. So in modern psychology they say this is an ego, which creates a split in the two hemispheres of our brain. Our right brain is autobiographic. It records, registers just what's going on in the external world. And the left brain is the interpreter. By seeing that, the right brain passes the information to the left brain, the right brain processes, and the left brain speaks it out. Now, if there is a split between the two hemispheres, there may be a surgical split, really physical split, but for most of us, it is just our emotional split. Our emotions create that split. Then what happens? The information is not passed to the left brain. But the left brain is a propaganda machine. It's the language brain. It will speak out. If the right brain's information has not gone there, it will speak out in a way as if to convince himself that what I am saying is correct, and at the same time it will try to convince the entire world that what he is saying is correct. Just, I will give a very nice, there is a nice experiment, the split brain experiment speaks of this. There's a very nice book has came out from this entire research. The name of the book is Why Everyone Else is a Hypocrite. This experiment I have spoken of in some other context, in so many places. Why we are speaking, we will come to that why we are speaking of this experiment here. That a person who has real split, surgical split between the left and the right brain, was made to sit in a chair in such a way that he cannot turn his head. His head is fixed, and now on the left side there is a display, something is displayed. What is displayed? Just get up from your chair and move forward. Now it has, the display is in such an angle that when he tries to see it, as he cannot move his head, only the left eye can see it, the right eye cannot see it, because his head is fixed. It has been kept in such an angle, only the left eye can see. So when he sees that display, he immediately gets up and starts moving. The one who was conducting the experiment, he told, stop. Why you got up? Why are you moving? And then immediately the man says, you see, there is a fridge in front. I am feeling a bit thirsty. There is some cold water there. I want to drink. The one who was observing, he knows very well. Seeing the instruction, he got up, but immediately he has made a story. Not only that, he is convinced that he is thirsty, this we're going to drink, and he wants to make others believe. What has happened? As there is a split between his left and right brain. Previously, they thought that if there is a split, it doesn't make any difference. But this is the experiment from which they understood that there is a difference. What's the difference? Now, in our brain, there is a crisscross. That what you see with the left eye is registered in the right brain. What you see with the right eye is registered in the left brain. What you do with your left hand is registered in the right brain. What you do with your right hand is registered in the left brain. There is a crisscross. So now, as this person was made to sit in such a way that he cannot turn his head, so only the left eye has registered that display, get up and move, that was registered only on the right brain. It is autobiographical, it is registered, but it couldn't transmit it to the left brain because there is a split. But the language brain has not activated, but the right brain has already registered, and accordingly he has started acting. He has got up. He has started moving. Now no one wants to be queer. That if someone says, why are you moving? I am aimlessly moving. No one will say. I always want to show that whatever I am doing with purpose. To show that immediately the language will come into action. It's a propaganda machine. It will make me believe that there is a purpose. Of course there is a purpose. I am going to drink the water. The one who is conducting the experiment, he knows that he is not for that reason got up. He got up for some other reason. So that's why the book which is written on this experiment is Why Everyone Else is a Hypocrite. You will find in this world, you always find I am sincere, others are all hypocrite. With all, especially those who have serious psychological issues, you will find it is very strong. They will go on blaming the entire world. He is right. Entire world is hypocrite. Why it happens? So for all of us, there is no surgical split, but the tremendous ego, my opinion, my team, my tribe, my religion, that creates that split. My faith, holier than thou, that has created that split. And now, what that language brain starts doing, that it's havoc. It will start playing havoc. So now come back to what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. That ego, speaking of ego, that ego has created a split. It makes the language very strong. He is resorting to the cruelty just because of ahamta and mamata, me and mine. Some very person, if I had empathy, I would have understood that no one steals just as a hobby. There may be some kleptomania, but for most of us it is out of necessity. A very poor man out of necessity most probably had no other means and then stole some little money. If my ego was sublimated, I would have empathy. Just in small children you will find, when they are all playing together, one falls and starts crying, all will start crying. As their ego is something not very strong, they very easily relate with empathy. But as our ego gets very strong, we become something totally a separate existence. We build a total separate existence, segregated from all. There's no empathy. No empathy ensues from our heart then. So it has actually happened. The entire thing has happened as I have no empathy. My ego is so strong. I can in no way sympathize with that person who has done something wrong, but most probably he's in a very miserable state. Somehow, but that ego came, that he doesn't know whom he has stolen. I will teach him the lesson. What has happened? The language brain has started creating its own language. It's just in a way it is constantly convincing himself that what I am saying is correct and trying to make others also believe what he's saying is true. So that's what you find is the work of the wicked eye. Now what is this wicked eye? It is the ego that says, what? Don't they know me? I have so much money. Who is wealthier than I? If a thief robs such a man of only 10 rupees, first of all he wrings the money out of the thief, then he gives him a good beating, but the matter doesn't end there, and the thief is handed over to the police and is eventually sent to jail. The wicked eye says, what? Doesn't the rogue know whom he has robbed? To steal my 10 rupees? How dare he? So here, just see how the ego creates all the barriers, all the separation. If our ego was attenuated, we are bound to relate to the world in empathy. There are so many examples that Swami Vivekananda was highly inspired by Pabhari Baba. From his life, he just told a very nice incident that he, being a man of realization, saw God everywhere, in every being. One day a thief came to steal something from his house, and suddenly he made some noise. So Pabhari Baba became just aware, and the thief was frightened. So he couldn't take all the things. Some things he took and he was running. And Pabhari Baba was running behind him with some other things. They said, you forgot to take this. And that man was transformed much later. It's very interesting, this, if you read the stories, that the thief himself was surprised, who could never believe that someone can behave in this way. That he saw God and God alone, nothing else. Even in the thief he is seeing God. And so that's the transformation. Sometimes we cannot relate to it. But that's the transformation which comes when we can get rid of our ego. It becomes, our heart becomes something that in love it is unbound. There is no bound in it. It starts relating to the entire world through empathy. One of the greatest example, the biggest example is Jesus' life. You see, can you think a person who has been crucified at that moment is saying, oh God, please forgive them, where they don't know what they're doing? And now compare it with the so-called man in the sunset plane, who has just, for a person, the 10 rupees has been stolen, and what's the way he's reacting. And then we can understand what the wicked eye Sri Ramakrishna is speaking of. So with this, we stop our discussion today. Thank you all. We will continue with the discussion again in the next class. Namaskar.